I'm Stargate Pioneer.
I'm Haley.
And I'm Lauren from Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.,
a podcast member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the one you're listening to now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other podcasts
at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3,
2,
1.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to episode 29 of Better Podcasting. My name is Stephen John Drew, and with me today is Stargate Pioneer.
It's great to be riding side saddle with the Steven Wanster tonight. It's awesome.
Some call me the Wanmeister General.
General, major.
There's a couple of jokes in there that only SP gets, so we'll just...
Catch 22, man! Major.
I was actually going more with the Wan joke, but you won't get... nobody gets that. Well, maybe 3 people
Not
get
anymore.
that, so...
Yeah, that's right.
How's your week going, SP?
It's awesome because it's over. We're recording this Friday night, and it's awesome always being able to leave work and go, we're going to record Better Podcasting tonight. You guys have no idea how much it really helps out on days like today, because today was a kind of a busy day at work, and I just kept on looking forward to tonight. I get to record Better Podcasting, so it's awesome, and I'm psyched, and we got a lot of great stuff for you tonight. We're starting a brand new arc, and we've got a full plate for you tonight. Can't wait to get to it.
There is a plethora of material indeed, and get this. We are breaking our Better Podcasting Facebook Live virginity tonight on this show here. That's right. If you like us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/betterpodcasting, you are actually seeing Better Podcasting went live. In theory, the quality is Facebook Live quality. It's a little bit downgraded on my part. I haven't intentionally done that so that the YouTube video is a little bit clearer. But with that said, it's like a small little box on your Facebook feed. So if you like us at facebook.com/betterpodcast, facebook.com/betterpodcasting. I was thinking I was doing that reverse. You will be seeing that tonight.
Yeah, but Steven, for Facebook Live, it's got to be a handheld, like, mobile device. Can you pick up your camera and do the shaky cam thing throughout the entire
what I'm
podcast?
doing? I have my camera pointed at the monitor the whole night. I'm going to hold it at the monitor and everybody will see. No, that's not true. Facebook.live. Let's call it that. If they don't own that, they should. Facebook.live is indeed compatible with a lot of video programs, including XSplit, the one that we use. So shaky cam no more. You can definitely do more than shaky cam.
And this is actually our third time on the Gonna Geek Network doing this, using Facebook Live. I really enjoy it. If you haven't checked it out lately, go ahead, invest to gate into the capabilities to make it happen. See if you have the good uplink, the good downlink, the good computer capability to be able to capture a stream and send it out to Facebook Live, because let me tell you, it is awesome. Lots more visibility on Facebook than anywhere else that I know of.
Absolutely. And we're going to just dive right into our mic arc. But first, quickly remind you, we are in the final stretch. Insert Mario Brothers speed up sound effect here. We are giving away the Logitech C920 web camera. This web camera is a beautiful piece of equipment that SP and I do indeed use for this very show. And if you want to enter, you can email contest@betterpodcasting.com. And I'm going to go off the books here, SP. If you want to enter,
my goodness,
we're in the final stages. Just send us an email and tell us why you enjoy us, and we'll consider that even an entrance as well. Final stretch, why not, right?
Why not? Yeah, go ahead, get your entries in, just like Jeremy Dennis did. And he said, hey guys, if I'd won, I'd mount it most of the time. And that was back when we were asking you to explain your use case. Are you going to mount it? Are you going to take it mobily? Or are you going to put it on your monitor? So he said, I'd mount it most of the time, but I'd also take it on the road as my podcast plans are being at a couple conventions this year. One of my earliest uses of the webcam, because another thing we asked is an early webcam story that's family friendly, was when I sent in a short recording for the Tech TV Netcam network, commercial bumpers. Back in the day, it was usually used on air, and I wish I could find the copy that I had recorded. Thanks. Love the show. So, Jeremy, thank you very much for entering into the contest. We really appreciate your entry, and you, sir, might win yourself a Logitech C920 webcam.
Da, 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 da! I don't know why, but I really felt like I needed that sound effect. No?
I know. We're both just psyched tonight. It's awesome.
It's true. It's a good weekend. Well, it's
the weekend.
It's the weekend.
And all
it's the weekend. We don't know that it's going to be a good weekend. That's a little premature on my part. So let's just go ahead and talk microphones. Do you really need a microphone to podcast? That's a good question, SP. Let's start there.
Yes, you need some sort of way to capture your sound and to record it or to stream it. Yes, absolutely. And that's generally known as a microphone. Now, I understand, Stephen, that you're up in Canada and at some points in time, you guys think using the tin cans with the string on it over hundreds of miles to go to the Yukon and the dog sleds and stuff like that. You think that's a microphone. And it kind of is, but that's not the definition of the microphone we're talking about here. We're talking about an electronic microphone, one that plugs in either USB or XLR into some sort of capturing device. And we can base our discussions on that. And yes, you do need a microphone to podcast.
Absolutely. And what we're doing in this arc is definitely talking microphones. We're going to break this into at least 3 parts because we always say at least because the last time we said it was a 3-part arc, we ended up making it a 4-part. So
Stephen lies.
I lied. I'm a liar. But the first one today is we're going to talk a little bit about overview with microphones, some things that you need to know with microphones and whatnot, and then also how to set levels. The second part in our arc, we're going to talk a little bit about choosing and using. So there's a variety of microphones available. We're going to help you get through the choosing process as well as how you might want to use them a little bit. And then the final one is special use microphones, or the currently scheduled to be final one is for special use microphones. And that will be something that, I'll just leave it at that and tease that. And it'll be a lot of fun to talk about. So today we are going with the basics, and we've slightly touched on some of these items before, but we do recognize that maybe you haven't heard our entire back catalog, and if you haven't, you should. But seriously, no, it's all good. And what we want to start with is breaking it down into the sort of explaining the 2 main types of microphones. You've got dynamic microphones and you've got condenser microphones. Those are your 2 main categories. SP, I will let you talk about your favorite microphone first, the condenser microphone.
So the condenser microphone, what that does, it's like your cell phone microphone or a video camera microphone or your earbuds that comes with your iPhone. If you happen to have an iPhone, that's actually a condenser microphone. And what that does is, in general, it captures a large field of sound all around it. Some call it omnidirectional. Some microphones, like the Blue Yeti, can go down in portion of that field, but it's still a much wider field than a dynamic cardioid microphone. And this is a benefit because it captures great sound, but unfortunately it's also a detriment because it captures every great sound. So literally, if you have an ant passing gas in the bathroom across the street, you're gonna hear that flatulence. You really will. And it was really funny.
You're talking about like your ant, not like a little crawly creature. You're talking
I'm talking about a little creature ant.
Okay,
so
fair.
The funny thing is, I was at a wedding of a fellow Gonna Geek podcaster, Kier Hansen. He is the producer of In Defense Of. He's also a co-host and part-time producer of Gallifrey Public Radio. both podcasts found at goodgeek.com. And I was going through his house. He had an open house and he took several of us down to the basement to his podcast studio. Really enjoyed that. That was an awesome tour. And I was wondering, because he had used a condenser mic for a while, and take a look at the microphone that is sitting on his microphone stand. It is not a condenser microphone. It was a dynamic cardioid microphone. And I said, well, here. So because he really loved the condenser microphone. A lot of people really, really do. A co-host of ours, Chris Farrell, he also loves his condenser microphone. And you, sir, have also tried a condenser microphone, and it is a good sound if you can control it. However, in most podcast studios, you can't. And it was really funny. So it was him and I, we were talking about it. We had several different other podcasters on the network were writing back of us. And I said, oh yeah, so why'd you do that? And he goes, I love the sound on that. But when my wife, Julie, across the house in the yard outside taking care of the chickens, yes, he has chickens, taking care of I could hear that. And I'm like, you're kidding, right? And he's like, no, I actually heard it on the recording later. I was like, wow. So that's the detriment of condenser microphones. There's a lot of ways that you can do. You can create sound boosts. You can try to tap down the sound in the area. But for hobby podcasters, I'll tell you, it's probably your best bet to go with the dynamic cardioid microphone. And why is that, Stephen?
Because a dynamic cardioid microphone has a very narrow pattern. So what it is if you picture a microphone, you know how you hold it, and it's everybody knows how to hold a microphone. You're born knowing how to hold a microphone, I'm pretty sure today. The path is set to pick up directly in front of the microphone, and that path can vary. There's three main types of dynamic microphones. There's your standard cardioid microphone, there's your super cardioid microphone, and your hyper cardioid microphone. And the cardioid has the biggest pattern, so picture it like a V out from the microphone. Then your super cardioid is a smaller V, so a lot more directional. And then your hypercardioid is pretty much still a V technically, but an even narrower V out. So the basically the super and the hyper, you have to be more on top of it, more in front of it. With the dynamic, you get a bit of play or a little bit more play, which is actually beneficial to prevent peas from popping, because you can kind of put it off to the side a little bit and avoid some of that. And the dynamic is by far, hands down, the type of microphone that SP and I both recommend for podcasters, because it does have a lot more narrow field of pickup. With that said, if you got a kid yelling outside of the room, you're going to hear that. If you got a loud computer right on your desk, you're going to hear that. You are going to hear some of these things. It's not an instant only hear the voice, but you're going to hear a hell of a lot less than if you're using a condenser. See, there you go. There's your demo right there. SP types loudly into his dynamic microphone. Now, here's one of the things that you might want to remember as well with the dynamic microphones is that I know everybody pictures studio. They're like, you know what, a studio though, I'm pretty sure they use a condenser microphone. Yes, a recording studio does, but here's the thing that you want to remember is they have a lot of soundproofing. You see those artists go into the box. It's not just because they like to be all alone. It's because it helps protect the sound flooding. What do you call it? The sound bleed? I guess you might call it sound bleed. And then the dynamic microphones, if you actually go to a radio studio, a lot of them do use dynamic microphones. For example, the radio stations that I tend to listen to, I know for a fact that they have the big brother of SP's microphone, the RE20. It is the same type of microphone as SP's, just better. I know a lot of the XM folks, they use the Shure SM7B. Who has one of those? So it is a dynamic microphone is quite often a staple for radio broadcast.
It is. And also, if you can get into okay, let me give you an example of a sound booth. Have anybody actually gone in for a hearing test? I have an ear issue. When you go into those sound booths, it is really eerie because they have to get really down low sounds or really faint sounds to really test what your hearing is. And that is what we're talking about. For a condenser microphone, you got to be in one of those environments that you're isolating the noise from outside and that you are getting zero reverberation or echoes from the wall bouncing off back and forth off. If you are into home theater sound, you will notice that you have to put your speakers in certain areas of the room because you're worried about the sound bouncing off. It's coming out of the speaker and bouncing off a wall or bouncing off the floor or reflecting off the ceiling or something like that. It's the same thing happens with microphones. You have to really protect that sound. And that is why there's a difference between a good use of a studio condenser microphone and a dynamic microphone. The microphones that we used at the WGN Gonna Geek panel podcast that we did at C2E2, they're the same microphone that I have in front of me. And contrary to popular belief, I did not steal this. I actually bought it way before we went to WGN. I have podcasts to prove it, video podcasts to prove it. Thank you very much, Stephen. But the point is, it is this style of microphone because it's a very affordable microphone that gives a great sound, a very clear sound, and it deals with a lot of the stuff around it. So dynamic cardioid microphones, once again, are really what you need to have in order to sound good in most podcast situations. And that's why we harp over and over, you need to do dynamic cardioid microphones. So if you have one, and it doesn't matter if it's a dynamic cardioid or a condenser, you got to know how to use it. And the first thing you need to do is how to set the level of it. So to make sure you're not clipping, to make sure you're not too quiet, to make sure you're minimizing the noise in the system and maximizing the sound value. Right, Stephen?
Absolutely. And this is something that we're just going to take a moment here to explain a little bit about why it's important. And number one, if you're not setting your levels correctly on your microphone, you're not using it to its full power. For example, if I was to take this microphone and run it too low, it's not going to have the same sort of quality as if I had it dialed in correctly. And there's sort of two main components to setting. If you set it too loud, you end up doing what's called clipping. And clipping is essentially running your microphone too loud so that your equipment can't handle that sound. I'll give you a weird random analogy that has nothing to do with podcasting, because really you want to keep water away from your podcasting, as we talked about last week, which is if you have a pipe and you have a 2-inch pipe, and then all of a sudden, without adapting it, you just take a 1/2-inch pipe and you put it into that 2-inch pipe and you start flowing water down the 2-inch pipe, you're getting a lot of leakage, and that 1/2-inch pipe is not capturing all of that 2-inch pipe water. So if you are taking your microphone and you are running it too loud, i.e. the 2-inch pipe, and you're sending it into a source that cannot handle that, i.e. the 1/2-inch pipe, you're losing voice quality and you cannot get that back. That is unrecoverable. You can do things to mask it, but at the end of the day, when you clip it, and if you've ever used Audacity or another recording program and you see the waveform go so high that you don't see it anymore, that's clipping. You have lost data. You are running your levels too high. On the flip side, let's say that you end up running your levels too low and you end up later amplifying it. Well, you're going to end up having your signal essentially cluttered and crowded by line noise, because every device has a certain amount of noise that's in there. It doesn't matter if it's digital or if it's analog. There is a certain amount of noise that is in it. And so an example of that is, let's say that you end up running your microphone too low, and then it goes through a cable into your mixer, and then from there it goes into your recorder. Well, what happens is that every time that you go through a cable, that cable has a certain amount of noise. And if you end up running your microphone levels too low, the noise kind of evens out with that level, and so your mic gets buried. An example of that is, I'll try to break it down into fractions here, which is, let's say that you have your microphone level set of 3/4 of your audio stream. And let's randomly say, and this is completely made up, you're running your line noise in your system is 1/8 of your signal. Well, what happens is your microphone is so much louder than that line noise that you don't hear that line noise. It's buried. It's just beyond or below your microphone. Now, let's say that you run your microphone so low that you're more at par. Let's say you're running it at, at 1/4 of your signal, and then you've still got your 8th line noise in there. Well, now what you have to do in order to get back to that 3/4 level, you have to take your entire recording and multiply that by 3 to get that back, that quarter microphone volume, and get it up towards that 3/4 that you were in the previous test. You have to multiply it by 3. Well, you're also multiplying that line noise. So you're taking it from 1/8 of your signal and you're making it into 3/8 of your recording. And that noise is going to be more noticeable. It's going to start to interfere a little bit with your mic quality. And that's why it's really important to set your levels not too high, but not too low either. Was that confusing?
Yep. You wanted to be just like the porridge. You wanted to be just right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Now, I understood. If anybody has any questions, please let us know. But next, we have a little special treat for you, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be showing you nominally how you set levels on a mixer. But the first we want to talk about, if you happen to have our favorite microphone, the ATR 2100, and you don't have a mixer, you don't have an audio interface, and you are going direct USB into your computer, you still have to worry about levels. Now, on a Windows machine, you can go into the bottom right-hand corner and there's a little speaker there. If you right-click on it, you can bring up recording devices. You can find it. It's usually named the ATR 2100. If you're going through a USB mixer, it's labeled USB audio codec or something like that. So you click into that, you bring up the properties, and then you go to the levels, and then you see what you have there. Now, I would recommend that you record a little bit into Audacity maybe first, just to make sure that you're not clipping there. The next step, if you're going to use a program like Skype, you got to go into Skype and go into audio options. There, when you click in the tools, go to audio options. When you get in there, you will see a little box underneath the volume meter, and it will say something like adjust to levels, or automatically adjust to levels. Automatically adjust microphone settings. That's what it has. Click that off. Take it off. You don't want it checked, because if you have it checked, your microphone levels are going to go woo.
Yeah.
Because the automatic compressor is going to try to keep up with your changes in speech, and the levels are not going to catch up with you. It's great if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not recording sound, if you're on a business call or something like that, if you're on your cell phone. But if you're recording a podcast, it will mess you up, especially if you're using some sort of onboard computer, MP3 Skype recorder, eVair, or something like that. So you got to take it off. And again, you use the recording, the tools that are available to you. And what does that mean? You use your buddy Echo, Skype Echo. You call her and you talk into your mic, and then you hear it back. It's like 20 seconds of total time, 10 seconds to say something, 20 seconds to say something, and then you hear it back. And then you just fiddle around with it until you get it dialed in. And that is how you set your levels if you have a USB microphone, or mixer for that matter, after you've got that dialed in. Now, Stephen, we both have mixers. Most hobby podcasters that play live sounds or whatever will have a mixer. And I remember my first mixer. Matter of fact, I might have actually called you. I know I was talking to Sean a lot. I said, how the heck am I which knob am I supposed to turn? I don't understand it at all. Well, we're going to break it down for you really simply at a high level right now, but at least get you pointed in the right direction. And in order to do that, we actually connected my third camera again. So, Stephen, let's roll with the picture.
Absolutely. And we will describe this for the audio listener. And if you want, you can absolutely go in and follow this on, couldn't remember her website, betterpodcasting.com. And you can definitely follow along. But we're just going to talk about it verbally as well, so you'll be able to hear it during the podcast as well.
So what I have off to my left is my ATR 2100. I've got it plugged into channel 1 of the mixer, and I'm just going to go through setting it. Now, right now, I'm still talking through my main mic and actually through the podcast. That's what you're going to hear. But in the recorded version, Stephen might actually dial in the ATR 2100, because just like the mic test that I did a couple of weeks ago with the Shure SM7B and the RE320, I'm recording both tracks. In this particular case, channel 1 which I'm pointing to on the mixer, that is what the ATR 2100 is plugged into. And as you will see, I've got the level, or the basically you can think of the volume, but I've got it set to unity. You want to set that to unity. You want to set your main to unity, wherever that is on your mixer. Yes, sir.
What is unity?
Unity is basically 0. It's not negative. It's not plus. It's 0. And that is the least amount of noise that will be introduced into the system. So that is why it's important to set those at unity.
And the thing that we should note here with unity is that some boards have it actually as 0, and we're talking usually the faders or the knobs at the bottom. They usually will say either 0, or what else will they have? There's a certain symbol that they sometimes use.
Well, there's an infinity, and I can't remember what the other symbol was, but infinity is like most, and that is like your highest. What is the other symbol? Is it 0?
Well, so that's an interesting thing about the infinity, is that like when you're at the neutral levels on like the Behringer board, they have it at 0. That is neutral on your faders. But why I wanted to touch base on this infinity thing is just to illustrate that every board is different. And I know that there are some that infinity is high, but quite often they're the lowest, so the bottom, the most muted, essentially off.
Yes.
So every board's different. Some of them actually don't even use that symbol, but I believe most of the time it is meaning absolutely nothing.
Yeah, mine does say infinity for the most, and it goes down to minus 60, and at minus 70 it goes down to infinity. So it's infinity down. And you just fade out, but it doesn't completely mute the channel. You can still, if you go into recorder and you really jack it up, you can really hear that volume there. But that's sort of advanced. What we're talking about is setting your board to prepare the channel. So you have to set the master at unity, and you set the mic at unity. And as you see, all my EQs are at basically neutral. They're all in the up position. I've got the pan set straight up. In an ideal situation, all my UGS ports here, the UGS 1, UGS 2, FX, they would all be set to 0 basically, or infinity in this case. And since I'm recording a line out to my digital recorder, I've got that going through the FX. So that is why the FX is up just a little bit. So that's the ATR 2100, how it's recording. This knob up top, that's the gain. And what you want to do is you want to minimize the gain, but you want to put as much gain as possible earlier in the system, as Stephen talked about before, because the more gain you introduce afterwards, the more noise you're going to introduce, or line noise you're going to amplify throughout the system. So the best way to do this is I'm actually going to turn off my main microphone that I'm talking through right here, and I'm going to talk instead through the ATR 2100, and I'm going to use the view meter to get those green lights as high as I can without going yellow with normal speech. And you're going to see something that's a little bit advanced with this, because the ATR 2100 takes a lot of gain. So we're going to show you how to compensate for that as well.
And so just while SP's doing that, I'm just going to quickly go in here and recap what SP said, which is on most boards, you have 3 sort of main volume controls. It doesn't matter how simple or complicated it is. With most boards, you have a knob towards the top of the channel, like a little dial thing, which is usually your gain. At the bottom, you have often it's called a volume. Sometimes it's the little slide fader. Sometimes it is another knob. That is another place. And then your entire board has an output, which is often faders or a knob as well, or a set of knobs. So that is something that you, on any board, have those 3 areas, and you want to start by setting them at unity, i.e. 0, which 0 means level. As you look at your board, you will see that often there are numbers below 0. We do not mean turn them off.
When you're talking about 0 or normalized, we're just talking about where you begin. It's not plus, it's not minus, it is 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this channel, and I'm going to talk into my ATR 2100, and you will see those green lights go up as I turn up the main gain. So we're going to turn up the main gain, talk. What you see though is I'm going to talk really loud. Loud. I don't get any yellow or red meters on lights on my view meter. So what I need to do then in this special case, since this takes a lot of gain, I'm going to have to turn my level up just a little bit, not somewhere around 2.5, 3. Load. And you see, if you're watching the YouTube, you're seeing some yellow on the view meter there. So that is how you set it. With excited speech, you can go up. Now I can turn it down a little bit and it will be just fine, but you just don't want to clip. You don't want to go into that red.
Right.
So that's it. That you turn up the gain, and if you can't turn up the gain anymore, you turn up the level. Now, when I turn up the level, I'm introducing some additional noise into the system, but in this particular case, it's the only way to get the level out. So there you go. And if you want to invest in some preamp like the DBX to get additional gain, or a cloud lifter or a FET head or something like that that gives you clean inline gain, you can definitely do that as well. And that is why I got the DBX to begin with, was because I knew both the Electro Voice RE320 and the Shure SM7B would function better with additional gain. I knew that based on reviews and everything else. It's that simple. You set everything to unity, you turn up the gain, and if you can't turn up the gain enough, you turn up the level of the channel just a little bit. And if you have to go more than that, you need to introduce additional gain into the system before it reaches the board. That's simple, right, Stephen?
It is. And there's a reason that those meters are there. The meters are there on the side of the board or whatever device you're using to give you an indication of how you're running your levels. And as I mentioned, if those levels are too low, somewhere later past that board in your recording or whatever, you end up having to introduce more noise down the road. The only footnote that I will have to this is that you want to also use your cans and listen, how is it sounding? Because sometimes, depending on the microphone, if you turn that gain knob up too much, you can overdrive the microphone. There are scenarios. And so if that's the case, and if you're in a scenario where you're turning that gain really, really high, look at the rest of your setup. Is your main outputs on your board too low? Is your recording outputs inputs too low? Because if you do turn up that gain far too high, there is a chance you could drive that microphone too much, and then all of a sudden it might sound kind of clippy like that. So that can very well happen. And so just be careful when you go through it. Play it back. That's going to be your best friend. If it sounds like crap, something has gone wrong somewhere. And if you're running that gain too high, odds are there's something wrong.
And if you're saying you guys are so good, that will never happen to you. Well, guess what, folks? It happened to me in late December, early January of this past year, as I was trying to use the Shure SM7B, as I had originally started using the DBX 286S with my Sennheiser E935 microphone earlier last summer when I bought it off of eBay. I was overdriving the system, basically, and then some connections were bad. But in a sense, I was overdriving the system, and it took me a while to learn exactly how to set it. And it was a similar process. You start low and then you start adding things as you go along to get the levels correctly. So yes, even SP, and Stephen, I'm going to call you out. Even Stephen overdrived his board just a little bit earlier last year as well when he first got that BP40.
Yes, you are indeed correct, Mr. Pioneer. I have overdriven many, many a times, and it hurts. It hurts my ears when I hear it.
It does. So don't worry about it. If you don't get the sound right off the bat, don't worry about it. Just keep on fiddling. Ask for some help. I asked for some help. Mike Phillips helped me out with my DBX, and now I can help other people at least. Yeah. Matter of fact, I helped you, Stephen, dial yours in, and yours sounds pretty well. So awesome. Yes, ask for some help, and then get your sound going good.
And so just one last recap here is to start at the earliest part of the chain and work your way through. If you don't know what that is in your setup, send us an email and we will tell us how it's set up, and we can probably help you narrow it down. And pay attention to your meters. Your meters are your hero. And remember the advice that we said, don't overdrive, but don't underdrive either, because if you have that gain too low at the start, you're making it up for later in your path, like the volume knob or your board output. And you may not see them, but there's essentially cables running from one to another inside that board. So keep that in mind. And one last piece of advice that I have for you. When you do set levels, are you happy with it? Ask yourself that question. Are you happy with the sound? Because that's the most important thing. I don't care if you're somebody who has done 1,000 podcasts and you claim that if your podcast is not set perfectly to minus 16 LUFS that it's unlistenable. No, you're wrong. As long as it sounds good, it is something that it is listenable. Don't be too worried about all of the technical stuff. How does it sound? If you all of a sudden start to have crackles or clicks or hiss, okay, maybe now it is getting unlistenable. But if you have it a little bit lower than the standard quote unquote is, or a little bit louder than the standard is, it's fine. Don't panic. You're a hobby podcaster.
Don't panic.
So if you do have questions, please email podcast@betterpodcasting.com and we're happy to clarify. But let's go ahead and download it up. Okay?
Before we download, let's remind folks, what are we going to be talking about next week, sir? What are we going to... We're going to be talking about microphones, right?
Green eggs and ham. I believe that's what it is.
So we've progressed from the bacon and the eggs to green eggs and ham.
Yes. No, we're going to, as we mentioned, choosing and using. So we're going to talk a little bit about positioning your microphone because that is as important, if not more important, than setting your levels.
Ooh, I can't wait to talk about that. But in the meantime, we have some great content left in the episode. Don't go away. We will be right at you with an awesome Better Podcasting download.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting download.
Apple doesn't change ever. That's what people say, isn't it?
Nope. They don't change at all. They've not progressed from the little, 500 megabyte little iPod sticks to 128 gigabyte iPhone S Pluses. No, they haven't changed at all. They actually, you know what, they haven't changed all that much? The iTunes software on the PC. I know it's gotten more advanced, but it's basically in the same fit form that it's been for like 10 years. So it's kind of funny that you say they don't change. They've actually changed a lot, but the fit form of the software hasn't changed all that much. There's been at least one major revision when they went to the tiles. You could go to the tile view, and that kind of changed a lot of things. But yeah, no, they don't change. And they haven't really changed how they handle how podcasts flow through their system since it started in 2004. But there's some good news. They're interested in what needs to change. And they had this great meeting with 7 noted podcasters. It's no idea who those 7 are, but obviously if they were notable for Apple, there were probably some, Apple has the stats, so they know who their 7 top downloaded podcast producers are. So they probably invited the top 7, top 10, whatever, and they got 7 there, 15, whatever. But 7 came and they had a session with Apple talking about podcasting and what Apple could do better for podcasters, or what podcaster concerns were for the distribution of their content through iTunes. So who did they talk to, Stephen?
I believe it was Eddie Q who did give the following statement, which was, "We have more people than ever focused on podcasting, including engineers, editors, and programmers. Podcasts hold a special place with us at Apple." So a fairly vague, non-descriptive description of what's going on right now.
Right. But let's get down to the nuts and bolts of what happened afterwards. Not 1, but 2 of those 7 podcasters divulged everything to the New York Times, which ran an article that said Apple doesn't care about podcasters, which is not entirely the case. The fact that Apple was having this meeting showed they did care. And these 7 podcasters signed non-disclosure agreements, and 2 of them broke that. So that's kind of, do you trust podcasters in the future sort of thing? And if I'm Google from the Google Play Music, if I'm Stitcher, if I'm Spreaker, if I'm iHeartRadio, do I trust podcasters if I bring them in, make them sign non-disclosure agreements, and then they avoid it anyway. I think there's a trust issue going on right now, which is actually dangerous for podcasters because it is a volatile time in between big networks coming in and forcing their own content out and really taking care of taking charge of the infrastructure versus hobby podcasters like Stephen and I. We are riding on the backbone of that great infrastructure that exists today. And if they start closing it off because these big networks come in because nobody can trust the small guy, that's an issue for the future. However, let's get back to Apple not caring about podcasters. Yes, Apple hasn't done a lot to enhance podcast discoverability other than creating these great devices and this great infrastructure to actually distribute it. But there's more that needs to happen today. You need to be able to share an episode through iTunes to social media, which is kind of difficult today. You need to be able to minimize the clicks, and one term was used as one click. There's never one click to get anything on the internet, but you have to minimize the clicks to get to the episode. So there's various different things that Apple needs to be taken aware of. And as we talked about on this very podcast a couple of episodes ago, if you look at if we look at our stats, it is nowhere near the 70% of iTunes that it once was. We are like way down from what that is. And all my new podcasts are like that. I was taking a look at the stats, and we'll have to run that through at another time, Stephen, because I just don't have them at my fingertips right now. But Apple has lost market share. You have Samsung that's come on stronger and stronger with their embedded podcast capability. You have Google Play Music, which has now opened the doors, albeit to a whimper rather than to a roar, but it's still in the system now.
Yeah.
And more people are going to be using alternative means to get this content than through iTunes. So iTunes has to step up their game, and I think they want to. It's just that it's going to take a little while for them to get ahead of steam up again to make sure that they're at the forefront of the industry for as long as the industry is there.
I agree 100%. And this is something that I have never thought that Apple doesn't care about podcasters. I just think that they came into a formula that worked really, really well. And so they stuck with it because they went with the whole why fix it if it ain't broke philosophy. And I think that that's not a bad thing. But you're right. Things have changed. Times are different. And there are bigger players now in the podcast delivery game. And so they have to start looking at it now of how do we keep modern, because there are some features that some of the other players are adding in. And the reality is that for a long time with mobile, with just the regular mobile platform, they dominated it with the iPods and iPhones, but more and more people are listening to podcasts on their device, and a lot of those people are now switching away from iPhones as well. Like if you look at the phone market, they have taken a big hit over the last 5 years in market share, and so they do have to think, how do we keep up with this podcast world? And I think that this is great to see them meeting with people. We don't know who these people are. I might just say that I happen to have an Apple NDA. No, that's not true. That's not true at all.
Wouldn't that be breaking the NDA, discussing the NDA?
Yeah, and I'll describe this for the audio listener. I totally took a piece of paper and wrote Apple NDA, but you can't see it because of my lights. So I do have a white piece of paper that I swear says Apple NDA in my writing, but the joke fell flat because you can't see it. So there you go.
Stephen is not funny. No. Actually, that was pretty cool. So thanks very much for that. And if you don't have if you're a podcaster and you don't have an opinion on it, like I never use iTunes or whatever, there's still a big force. There's a lot of iPhones around there. Mobile device downloads have gone up and up and up. If you listen to the feed on Libsyn, their podcast called The Feed, Rob Walsh, who's their VP of Podcaster Relations, he goes through stats. And actually, I was talking to him about maybe including some more stats. And unfortunately, we couldn't get those, so I won't divulge what those were. But he does a great job of saying what the average and the mean of podcast downloads are, what the total downloads of Libsyn are throughout the year, and that sort of stuff. So that is all great stuff. And I'm glad that Rob does that. Really appreciate that. And through that, I can honestly tell you that podcast delivery is going up in the mobile areas because he breaks down mobile downloads versus PC downloads versus set-top box downloads. But the one thing I will say is the mobile downloads to iPhones are going, or iOS is going down, and the mobile downloads to Android is going up. So it's following the trend that there's more and more and more Droid or Google-based phones out there than Apple phones. And I think Apple's got to take note of that. But there has been significant gains this year alone in 2016. And we're just in May. So in the past 5 months, it has dramatically gone up from the Android side and from the mobile side. So just beware that things are rapidly starting to change today in 2016. And it might not be the 2% growth that podcasts have had since 2004. I think it might go a little higher than that in 2016.
Agreed. Well, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with all of this. And if you do find yourself interested in information like this, just send us an email, podcast@betterpodcasting.com. We want to know what's on your radar so we can share it on the show, or just kind of tweak our show to make sure we talk more about the stuff that the listeners and viewers do like. So just email podcast@betterpodcasting.com and tell us what you think about this. And you can also make sure to send us clips, questions, however, by Twitter, by YouTube, whatever you want. Just make sure we get it, and we'll talk about it in the next segment. We had a question this week. Well, it was more of a comment, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, we did. And we put out our last episode, What is a Hobby Podcaster? And one of our intrepid listeners tweeted us back from the tweet that we sent out announcing the episode. And Diami Ploki said, "It's me! I'm a hobby podcaster." Well done, sir. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So very nice to hear from you. And also, remember when we were talking to Diami last week about the different ways that he could enhance his recording and the little XLR capsule that could go on the H5 to make 4 microphones at a event? Guess what he did? He tweeted us a picture not only of the H5 with the XLR capsule and the 4 microphones plugged into it through XLR cords, but he tweeted us some awesome woodworking microphone stands. You know what, Steven? I think he's got you there. Have you ever done a wooden microphone stand?
No, not a microphone stand. I've done a microphone riser, 2 of them actually, and my rack box is actually a DIY, but I've never done a mic stand. I am very impressed with this. And Diami, I know that you got my email that I had sent you before, and I'm like, what type of mic stand do you use? I had missed the Twitter. I don't know how I didn't get the notification, and I saw that after, and I'm just like, wow, he totally thought I was an idiot because he sent these beautiful pictures, and you can go to geeks.link/BP29 to see them there. It is incredible, homemade, and I don't want to sound like I'm discounting the work or anything. It looks like it's a fairly simple concept, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and it's very mobile too. It's meant to be mobile, right? You take the dowels out, you just detach them, unattach them, and they collapse, and they probably fit in a bag better than the collapsible stuff that we would recommend that you get from betterpodcastinggear.com. So that is awesome, Diami. We really appreciate that. And the more important thing, in addition to the great microphone stands, is when you go mobile, you don't need a lot of gear. He has an H5, 4 microphones, 4 microphone stands, and 4 XLR cords. That's all. And then 4 foam mounts or whatever. But that's it. That can fit in a fanny pack, really. So
yeah, really
good
cool
job, Diami. And we look forward to seeing some of your more great inventions in the future.
I love this, Diami. As somebody who absolutely embraces the DIY audio stuff, I tip my hat to you sincerely. Once again, geeks.link/BP29, and you can see these amazing, amazing DIY stands. And Diami, you should sell them. That's what I say.
You can. Absolutely. I got a great story for you afterwards on that too. So yeah, you can sell stuff like that. Go for it.
Absolutely. Well, that does take us to the end of our episode. And as we just want to recap here, put a nice little ribbon on there. We do have a contest. Very, very close to ending, as we mentioned. It ends May 31st, 2016. Email contest at betterpodcasting.com. In fact, I say that you pause right now and do it so you don't forget. And then come back and hit play, because we're just going to walk out the show here. So if you forget to come back, it's not the end of the world. But hit pause right now and email and tell us a little bit about your camera experiences if you want, and or why you like us, because we always like to hear feedback.
Mm-hmm. Or why you like me and you don't like Steven, because everybody tells us that. So thank you very much, everybody, for liking SP. I really enjoy that. Thanks.
Not sure that's true, but that does take us to the end of episode 29 of Better Podcasting.
It is literally true.
So for episode 29, my name's Steven John Drew. Looking forward to talking more mic action next week.
And I'm Stargate Pioneer, and I just love hobby podcasting.
DIY, it's your best friend. Bye!
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.